On today's episode of Locked On Suns, 3 key predictions from 3 different parts of Suns Clippers that will decide this series. You're ready? I'm ready. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to start your Wednesday, maybe close out your Tuesday whenever you're finding this show. We are here for you every single Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you are on YouTube, you're seeing our wonderful new setup here on the video display. The scroll at the bottom, the watch next, the follow and subscribe, the little banner over here with what I'm about to talk about. So hit subscribe, celebrate, do that. Drop a comment down below. You'll check the ticker. It'll tell you what to comment, but you can also go ahead and just drop me your key predictions, your keys. What do you think is going to decide this series? We'll get into all of it today. Today's show, guys, is brought to you by I made that 2 syllables. HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/NBA60. Use code NBA60 for 60% off, plus free shipping as well. Okay, so 3 key, we'll call them bold predictions. That makes people get a little bit more excited, so we might as well here. 3 things that I think are going to decide this series, but not just keys. We've talked about the Durant and Kawhi matchup. We've talked about a lot of things already. So I've given you my keys, but these are going to be predictions. These are going to be things you might not be expecting, things that you might be surprised to hear. And let's start with Kevin Durant. And the prediction here is that I think he's going to spend more time off the ball than on the ball, as crazy as that might sound, because really what inspired a lot of this episode is that I went back and watched Suns Clippers from February 16th. Now, you very well might be thinking, and you would not be wrong, that that game did not include a lot of the components of this series, right? Russell Westbrook had not yet joined the Clippers. Durant had joined the Suns. That game was actually, I believe, the day of his introduction, but it was not a game that he played in, of course. This was the last game heading into the trade deadline, but it did have Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Josh Okogie, Torrey Craig, Kawhi Leonard, even Marcus Morris, even Paul George, guys who we're not sure when we're going to see in this series. So there are some things to learn. What I was struck by watching that game back, the Suns really lost it because they just missed their open jumpers. They started 0 of 5 from the field in that game. They were either neck and neck or behind for most of it. They really never took control of that game. The Clippers were switching everything 1 through 4. They were, in some cases, running some pretty aggressive, schemed up defenses to try to take away some of the Suns' pick and roll and off-screen action. You know, there was a play where Devin Booker, it was basically like a Spain pick and roll where Devin Booker would usually set the down screen for DeAndre Ayton, who's rolling toward the basket, and then Booker would pop back up toward the top of the key. You've probably seen that set 100 times, 1,000,000 times. The Suns run it all the time. In this case, Booker didn't go to the top of the key. He kind of sprinted out before he even set the screen over to the right wing. There may be a name for this type of thing. I don't have it for you, but that's what it was. And rather than switching all of that, Paul George was guarding Booker. He just ran toward the middle of the court where Chris Paul was coming off the screen, getting downhill. Marcus Morris, who was in the corner where Josh Okogie was, just ignored Okogie, rotated off of him to go backfill where George had been, basically to cover up where Booker was open now. And then Okogie was just sitting there completely open in the corner, but that's a victory for the Clippers, right? And so you saw a lot of this stuff, switching to try to just suffocate whatever was going on and off the ball, and you saw a lot of aggressive, I guess that also counts as switching, but really just overdrive, hyperdrive stuff to just say, no, you're not getting what you want. Booker and Paul are not going to get, their plan A is not going to be available to them, right? But you watch that game, both of those guys were getting open shots. I thought that there were a couple times Booker took a pull-up three in that game. Chris Paul missed an elbow jumper that they just either took a little bit of a bad shot, didn't quite read the play super well, or weren't reading and trying to break it down at a super high level, maybe going through the motions. It was the last game before the deadline, or they just flat out missed it. All right, so where does Kevin Durant come into play here? I have a couple stats for you on this note. I know I've just been throwing Durant and Kawhi stats at you all week, but they're very interesting. These are two amazing players, and the Durant part of this is just so weird because of how little of it we saw, obviously. So Kevin Durant in which one is this? Spot up situations as a Sun, all right? And the nice thing about the NBA stats website is it actually breaks out Durant as a Sun and Durant as a net as separate players when you look at it by play type this way. So here's the deal. Durant was in the 99.8th percentile among players in spot-up situations per possession this season. You did not mishear me. He shot 69% from the field in those spots. That made up 20% of his offense, so it wasn't nothing. 4.1 possessions per game where he was... Spot up is exactly what it sounds like. He's standing off to the side and gets the ball off of an initial action, right? So you can think of the way that the Suns closed out that Thunder win, where they were just getting him the ball when Lou Dort helped off of it. Some of the stuff that they did against the Nuggets to close out that game on a very similar double drag set that they love to run. And KD's just basically a floor spacer there. But when he gets the ball, attacking a rotating defense, attacking space, I mean, that's almost a cheat code. It pretty much has been. 99.8th percentile. That means 0.2% of the league was better than him. I mean, there's not a lot of people in the NBA, so you're talking about a handful of players that were better. That's pretty impressive, and none of them, I can tell you, because the sort chart shows you this, none of the guys even close to his volume there were close to that 99.8th percentile. So you're talking about the only players better were, very much role players and that type of guy. The other part, off screens. Durant ran those types of sets almost as often as he did spot-up sets. So similar type of stuff, right, where it's off-ball, but in this case you're talking about sets where Durant specifically was moving. He was running toward, the top of the key on a pin down. He was, coming off of an interior in the paint screen. Some of that elbow screening stuff that I talked about with, I believe, the Jazz game that the Suns played with Ayton, and it might have been the Thunder game, actually, with Ayton and Durant inside the arc and the mid-range jumpers that he's getting. So it includes all of that. Durant was in the 86th percentile on those. Basically never turned the ball over, was fouled quite a bit in those spots, and shot 59% from the field. Off screen, he produced 1.2 points per possession, and in those spot-up situations, 1.7 points per possession. Those both would be the best offense in the NBA. All right? 1.2 points per possession is the same exact thing as saying, 121 points per 100 possessions. If you've ever heard any of those numbers thrown around, 121 is outstanding. 167 is unprecedented and not really a possibility in, big sample sizes. But that's just how good Durant was. And so you couple all this together, right? You put together the fact that the Suns were able to get good looks with Booker and Paul handling the ball, playmaking, producing. The fact that in a lot of those situations, the best choice the Clippers made was, we can't stop everything. What we're going to do is leave Okogie open, leave Torrey Craig open. They even put Zubats on Craig in that game, just allowing Zubats to basically say, I'm helping off this guy. I'm not even concerned about him. I'm a center. I just want to protect the rim, but I'm going to quote-unquote guard Torrey Craig. As you can see on YouTube, we're going to get to those guys in just a second. And then obviously Zubats is the other part of this, right? Zubats is going to likely be in a drop a lot of the time. At least that's what he wants to do, right? And I think the Clippers will try to get away with that, maybe more so against Paul than Booker. I don't know. We'll have to see. There are some other things they can do. They can bring him sort of up to the level of the screen and take away the pull-up jumper a little bit more, but the Suns made them pay with that too because DeAndre Ayton scored a lot in this game off of floaters and mid-range jumpers when he got that little pocket pass. So all of this is to say, the Clippers will likely be trying to take away that initial thing. And the Suns haven't really put the ball in Durant's hands a lot as the pick-and-roll ball handler. They don't even have to a lot of the time. That's their absolute chess move of chess moves that they'll get to if they have to do it. They don't want to do it. They don't need to do it. And so if the Clippers are preoccupied, especially without Paul George, of just trying to aggressively take away with switching and over-rotating and all this stuff, the pick-and-roll attack that the Suns are so known for and so polished with, Durant just standing over there in the corner, on the wing, whatever the case may be, you're allowing less help into the paint on those pick and rolls. You are making them pay if they do help with one of the best shooters ever to live. And you're allowing, when Durant does get the ball in those situations, coming off a screen or just catching in a spot-up situation, which he's already been elite at, you're allowing him to basically shoot or drive or go into a post-up on a mismatch, whatever the case is, against a defense that is already sold out to stop something else. So you're giving Durant an opportunity that a guy like Okogie or Craig have often gotten this season. Bridges, Crowder, Johnson in past years, right? They were able to have pretty efficient offensive games because of the space and the timing and the everything that they were able to get based on the attention that was going toward the superstar ball handlers. If you put Durant in that spot, forget it. And so, early in the series, we will see that. We will see Durant off ball more than on ball, despite his amazing, incredible skills. It's just going to make life easier for the Suns. It's going to test the Clippers, and it's going to just allow them to be more comfortable and not have to show their cards or make those chess moves so early. And they can win games regardless. They don't have to. And that's what's so special about this team. All right. Prediction number 2 coming up on Russell Westbrook. I haven't really talked about him a lot, but I was thinking about this series, again, watching that game, and I kind of felt like we might be overlooking him. I think he might be an X factor in this series. I'll tell you why next. First, today's show, folks, brought to you by Ultimate Basketball GM. The coolest game that a lot of us have ever played in the basketball world. We love it on the Locked On Podcast Network because, look, we sit here in front of you guys on screen every day with our GM hats on, and Ultimate Pro Basketball GM allows you to do just that, but in an actual virtual reality world. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of your franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you're responsible for dealing with challenging personalities, hiring the right coaches, trading and training players, navigating your franchise through free agency and the drafts across all multiple seasons, ups, downs, and everything in between. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable offline, on the go, as you want and when you want. Locked On Suns listeners get a free 100% boost to their franchise when they use the promo code LOCKEDON in the game store. Download the game by visiting probasketballgm.com, scan the code on their website, or look it up in your favorite app store. That's probasketballgm.com, Ultimate Basketball GM. Promo code LOCKEDON to get that free 100% boost. Start your dynasty today. Okay, Russell Westbrook. Let's just start with the basics, all right? The Clippers this season are plus 1.8 per 100 possessions. Pretty good. With Kawhi Leonard on the court and Paul George off the court, which, of course, a lot of that is just when Paul George has been on the bench, but we know now it'll be more so when Paul George is unavailable, which we expect him to be to start the season, right? I told you the other day, I believe when I was talking with Brandon, I don't remember for sure, that the Clippers, a lot of their best lineups are with Russell Westbrook. I think that their best lineup overall on the season is... No. That is not their best one on the season. But Norm Powell, Nicholas Batum, Westbrook, Leonard, and Zubats has been very good for them. But even better than that has been Westbrook, Gordon, Batum, Leonard, and Zubac, and that's been their starting lineup to close the year. Since Paul George went out, that lineup has been performing very well. So obviously, and we talked about this quite a bit, the absence of Paul George is going to affect a lot. I think a lot of what I just laid out about being able to use Durant in an off-ball way and manipulate the Clippers' defense with that stuff is because George is not going to be there. He's their best help defender, and he's maybe their best on-ball defender for perimeter-type guards as well. Clippers lineups with Russell Westbrook have been very good, and they've been pretty solid on both ends, which is one of the crazier aspects of this. And so I think he's an X factor on both ends of the court. And that's you could think of it as a prediction or an observation, whatever it is. I mean, he just gives them something that no one else can. And I know that's exactly the argument that Clippers fans made that everybody laughed at them about, but nevertheless, here I am saying it anyway. Lineups with Westbrook, George, and Leonard all have been suffocating defensively. Whether it's Eric Gordon, Marcus Morris, whoever it is out there with those three guys, the defense has been great. Now, we don't have Paul George, obviously, but what Russell Westbrook will be able to do defensively against somebody like Chris Paul, being able to stay attached to him, being able to fight through screens, all of that is going to be a deciding factor in how much that pick and roll attack by the Suns is going to be able to work. If Russell Westbrook, and I know I'm just getting this out of the way. I'm not trying to tell you that I think this will happen. I know you're already probably laughing, but look, this is the reality. If he can do this, then he'll be able to stay on the floor is where I'm going. But you just think, right? The drop coverage that Zubac wants to be in. Well, if Russell Westbrook, usually what the guard will do when the big man is dropping is the guard will fight over the screen. If Westbrook can actually do that and contest from behind and stay attached and limit the ability of Chris Paul to get that jumper off, okay, maybe you're talking about a little bit of a different outcome in the series, some adjustments the Suns will need to make. I'm not necessarily optimistic about that, but I could see him being helpful potentially anyway. Even if he ends up guarding Josh Okogie, which maybe he does. Maybe you have Morris on Durant, Kawhi on Booker. Maybe you have Batum on Durant and Kawhi on, I don't know. There's all sorts of ways you could do it. Russell Westbrook is going to have to defend, especially if they're switching a lot. All that to say that if he can stay on the floor, and they might have no choice but to keep him on the floor, I think that there's some things he's going to be able to do offensively that could punish the Suns a little bit. And I think, namely, it is matchup based, right? I've been wondering a lot who the Suns are going to put on Russell Westbrook guarding him in this series, to start games, to close games, whenever he's on the floor against the Suns starters. And the more that I thought about it, I think that I come down to that it will be Booker. I expect the Clippers starting lineup, if Morris is available, to be Westbrook, Gordon, Leonard, Morris, and Zubac. But even if it's Batum, this doesn't really affect too much. The point is Gordon will be out there. And so I think hiding Chris Paul on Eric Gordon is a little bit of a better decision for the Suns, because then Chris Paul, in a lot of moments, he's just going to be able to go stand out wherever Eric Gordon is spacing the floor. This isn't a team that runs a lot of complicated off-ball stuff, especially for people outside of George and really like Norman Powell. As far as I've seen, they don't do as much of that for Gordon, and so it limits the amount of movement and energy and everything else that Paul is going to have to put out in order to contain Eric Gordon. And Booker is a little bit bigger, a little bit more athletic, obviously less of an injury risk, and so the force that Russell Westbrook plays with, I think Booker handling that is better. If Russell Westbrook can get Booker in foul trouble, if Westbrook can just beat Booker enough times where it starts to be a problem and it's a little bit of a heat check adjustment time situation for the Suns, then the real interesting part comes, right? Then you're talking about, do you need to put Okogie onto Westbrook, right? Which I think is actually a little bit more comfortable for him than Kawhi would be. I think he'll start out on Kawhi with Booker again starting out on Westbrook. But if you have to adjust and put Okogie on Westbrook, then suddenly you're back to that original thing of, okay, you're having to put your best players on their best players defensively. You're putting Durant on Leonard probably at that point, and then Booker on Gordon, and then maybe Paul or Booker on Morris, and Paul stays on Gordon, whatever, the trickle down. I don't mean to list off all the matchup rambling, but yeah, this is how it all is going to break down. This is going to be a very one-on-one matchup to matchup type of series because that's how the Clippers play basketball. So it's all there, right? If he can get the Suns defenders, their star players, into foul trouble, if he can force adjustments by scoring the ball well enough, all these things, I think that you're really talking about a way that the Suns will have to adjust. In that first segment with the Durant stuff, I told you about all these ways that the Suns are going to be able to avoid needing to adjust. Westbrook has the ability to make the Suns adjust, and so I think that's why he'll be important. The last part of it is the obvious thing we always associate with Russell Westbrook, right? Which is the ability to push the ball in transition. The Suns were a top 10 transition defense this season. Very good. The Clippers were a top 5 transition offense this season, and they ran, they moved into hyperdrive and kind of kicked it into transition middle of the pack. So they don't always take advantage of it. The Suns allowed opponents to get into transition middle of the pack as well. If the Clippers can up their frequency on that stuff a little bit, try to buy some cheap points that way, especially with Paul George out, which will hurt their half-court offense, then you're talking about an advantage for the Clippers and another way that Russell Westbrook can really make a difference. I don't think none of this is to try to say, guys, that I think all of this is likely. We've all been making the Russell Westbrook jokes for Lord knows how long, right? I'm not here telling you that this is going to flip the series. I will mention that the Clippers have been a little bit worse, actually, in transition since George went out, which is a little bit interesting. In April, basically, 3-4 games. So I don't know. It is all very small samples and different ways of evaluating, and that's the name of this series. That's going to be the difficulty of evaluating this series. But for all those reasons I just listed, if he can just survive on defense, muck things up a little bit, fit into what the Clippers want to do on that end, and punish the Suns as a scorer, as an aggressive, driving scorer, I think that's a way you could see the Suns have to adjust. They're going to be worried about Kawhi Leonard. So they're not going to be needing to be reminded of Kawhi Leonard's brilliance. They're going to be sold out. That's going to be the game plan, is limit what that guy does. Put your best defenders on that guy. Westbrook is one of the players who can really change that. We'll talk about a couple more players who can really change that in the next segment. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. That's right. We have baseball, of course, here in the spring. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with the no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. We have Aaron Judge to pick up where he left off with the home run battle. We have, any number of pitchers. I'm partial to somebody like Blake Snell, Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove as an adopted Padres fan to go hit that over on strikeouts or the under on walks, whatever the case is. I like doing the first 5 innings when you have a starting pitcher mismatch. Throw the bullpens away. Focus on the first 5 when the starters are in there. Who's going to win that, what the over-under might be, etc. Baseball betting is fun. Don't miss your chance. Get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's close things out talking about some role players. I saved it for last, but it's never. It's no less interesting in my opinion. I know Josh Okogie and Torrey Craig are not necessarily the sexy names in this series, but bear with me here. Torrey Craig is going to be a big deal. And the real prediction is that Torrey Craig is going to close games over Okogie in this series. Not every single game. I'm not trying to predict. Every game is a unique beast. Every game is a unique battle, and teams are game planning to win each and every one. But that kind of goes into what I'm saying here too. The needing to win every game, the game planning to win every game, all that stuff. It would definitely benefit the Suns to win this game in series in 5 games. 4 games. I mean, great. I'm not trying to be that cocky though, right? But if you can win this in 5 games, you might never see Paul George. Maybe you just see him in game 5, but he's not going to, that's his first game back in weeks after a very ugly knee injury. So just come with me to that place of mind here as I'm giving you this prediction, because again, it is this opportunity for the Suns to really hit the gas and take care of business, and you might not have to deal with any of that other stuff with George or, the Ty Lue of it all, being a very good series adjuster as he tends to be. If you remember the game last series, I believe it might have been game 5, where DeMarcus Cousins is playing and gets, double-digit points out of nowhere against the Suns' backup center, which was basically non-existent, Dario Saric and everybody else, Torrey Craig, a little bit of small ball, all that. Boogie Cousins, of all people, came in, right? So you want to avoid that. And I feel like closing games with Torrey Craig, just trying to do everything you possibly can to contain Kawhi Leonard is what I would be doing. I've talked about this a little bit already, but to me, Okogie is a player who, like Mikal Bridges, honestly, even though they're very different physically, better on perimeter guys. We all remember Mikal trying to guard Giannis. Mikal, even against LeBron, Luka, players like that. It wasn't really ideal, right? Leonard's a little different because he's not just a sheer driving power force type of player, at least not typically. So I think Okogie can do fine, but I think Craig will be better. The other part of this is that I feel like Torrey Craig allows you to have a little bit more versatility. I don't think the Suns will necessarily want to start out games by switching all screens or a lot of screens. I mean, they do that a little bit already. So I guess it's really the, Zubats pick and rolls and things like that. I don't think that they'll want to start out that way, but if they get extra aggressive with off-ball switching and, 1-5 pick and roll switching and all that stuff, Craig is more versatile. If he gets mismatched in the post against Zubats, against Morris, players like that, I think you can trust Craig more with different types of players in addition to some of the guards than you would be able to with Okogie. Okogie is also, we have to remember, going through his first playoff push. He's never played in games like this. Wouldn't surprise me if there's some foul trouble, especially guarding Kawhi. If there are some games where he just shot isn't going in, he's maybe, making some boneheaded decisions. Like, it's not even an insult to the guy. It's just the reality of things you kind of need to remember as we're going through this. All of that makes me feel good about Craig as a steady veteran option and somebody who matches up better. The last part of this is there may be some games in this series where the Suns do have to go small. If Ayton is in foul trouble, if Ayton is ineffective, if he's not making his shots, or if he is just exposed on defense and not engaged and focused in those spots, similar to some of the stuff we saw against Dallas, right? You could see the Suns need to go small. The most likely option would be Durant being the biggest guy on the floor in that case. Even if it's Durant as the quote-unquote center in those lineups, if you're building lineups that way, you just need as much size as you can get out there. Maybe there's times when it's also not even Durant, and then Craig becomes a candidate to be the biggest guy on the court, as does somebody like Ish Wainwright, for instance. And if you're thinking of lineups that way, we're switching everything, we're just trying to keep the ball in front of us, we're trying to match the physicality, transition, we need to check people, we need to bump them, all that stuff. You start to value different types of players, right? And Craig is somebody who would be extra helpful in those situations as well. So all those different areas make me feel like Craig is going to play a very big role in this series, and is somebody I could see surpassing Okogie in a lot of situations because of all those different ways that the game might go that end up with Craig being valuable, right? It's not just one thing that I'm predicting here. It's all those different options, those different pathways that make me feel, okay, the answer once again here is Craig, right? So that's kind of where I feel like. Monty told us once upon a time, back when the Durant trade happened 2 months ago, that it was going to be matchup dependent. In every single game, Okogie has started. He hasn't had to adjust. The Suns are 8-0 with Durant. They lost some games without Durant, but at that time, Okogie and Craig were both starting, of course, and they haven't really had to change it. This might be the time when they do, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Be back tomorrow with a crossover episode with Darian Vaziri of Locked On Clippers. We'll go back and forth on keys, questions, all that stuff. Should be a fun show. And then we'll close out the week with Aaron Edwards' final predictions for the series and what to expect as we know more when teams start to practice and we get some more info. We might talk about the results of the play-in, all that fun stuff. Hit subscribe, hit follow if you like what you're hearing. If you're here for the first time or you just never bothered to subscribe before, please join on. We will be here for you every Monday through Friday. Bonus episodes recapping weekend playoff games and all the rest, all throughout what should be an awesome playoff run for your Phoenix Suns. Stay locked onto your team every day by hitting that subscribe and follow button. That'll wrap us up. Make Locked On NBA your second listen today. In the meantime, folks, and I will catch you all tomorrow.